The notification came at 11:48 on a Friday night, and I almost didn't see it. I'd been sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of Pinot Gris, going through the contractor invoices for the Oakville property, the kind of mindless administrative work I saved for late evenings when the house was quiet. My husband had gone to bed early. He had an early flight, he'd said, conference in Vancouver, something about a partnership deal that had been in the works for months. I wasn't even looking for anything. That's the part I keep coming back to. I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't checking up on him. I was doing invoices. The notification was from our joint Scotiabank account, a charge of $40,340 CAD at a hotel in Banff. The Fairmont, not Vancouver. Banff. I set down my wine glass very carefully, the way you do when your hands have started to shake and you don't want to make a sound. I opened the app. The charge had posted at 9:52 p.m., a two-night stay. 2 guests. My husband's name was on the reservation. I could see it in the transaction details because we'd linked the account to his Aeroplan, his full name, the same name I'd been signing beside on mortgage documents and tax returns and Christmas cards for 19 years. I didn't call him. I didn't walk down the hall and open the bedroom door. I just sat there in the kitchen with the contractor invoices spread out in front of me and thought about the fact that our son's medical school graduation ceremony was in 36 hours, in Halifax, where I was supposed to be flying tomorrow morning, where my husband had promised he would be standing beside me in the front row. We had booked our flights together in January. I still had the confirmation email. I had bought a new dress. I had arranged for his mother to fly in from Winnipeg because she hadn't seen our son in 2 years, and this was the kind of day that mattered. He was in Banff with someone else. I finished my wine. I rinsed the glass. I turned off the kitchen light and I went to the guest room, not our room, the guest room, and I lay down on top of the covers in the dark and I did not sleep. By the time the sky started going gray outside the window, I had made a list. His name was Bennett. My husband, Bennett Hale, 49 years old, regional director for a commercial real estate development firm based in Mississauga. Handsome in a way that had aged well, which I'd always been quietly proud of, the way you're proud of things that have nothing to do with you. We'd met at a fundraiser in 2005, gotten married in 2007, had our son Theo in 2008, and our daughter Annalise in 2011. We lived in a 4-bedroom house in Burlington that I had chosen because of the school district and the walk to the waterfront. I was a family law attorney. I want to be clear about that, not because I'm bragging, though 19 years of watching marriages dissolve from the inside out does teach you things, but because it matters for what comes next. I knew exactly what documentation I needed. I had helped clients gather it 100 times. I had sat across from women in my office who looked exactly the way I felt that morning, and I had handed them lists. Practical, clinical, manageable lists. Bank records. Joint assets. Shared passwords. Credit lines. Property titles. I knew that the worst thing you can do in the first 48 hours is act, so I didn't act. I booked an Uber to the airport. I texted my mother-in-law to confirm her gate at Pearson. I packed my carry-on. And when Bennett came out of the bedroom at 7:15 with his overnight bag, wearing the gray blazer I had bought him for his birthday, I told him to have a good trip. And I meant nothing by it, and he suspected nothing from it. And we kissed goodbye in the front hallway the way we had kissed goodbye 1,000 times before. I watched his car back out of the driveway. Then I went upstairs, took out the notebook I used for client intake, a plain Hilroy, nothing special, and I started writing things down. Theo didn't know any of it when I landed in Halifax. Of course he didn't. He was 23 years old, and it was the morning of his graduation, and he was standing outside the Dalhousie Student Union building in his dress shirt with his stethoscope around his neck because someone had dared him to wear it to breakfast. And when he saw me coming through the terminal doors, he smiled the exact same way he had smiled at age 6 when I used to pick him up from school. Just open, completely unguarded. My kid. I hugged him for a long time. Longer than usual. He let me. "Where's Dad?" he asked when I finally stepped back. I had prepared for this. I had run through it on the plane. His flight had a mechanical issue in Vancouver, I said. He's trying to get rerouted. He feels terrible. Theo's face did something complicated. He's gonna miss it? He's doing everything he can, I said. It wasn't the cleanest lie I'd ever told, but it was the only one I had. His grandmother was already at the hotel, which helped. She swept in with her enormous purse and her Winnipeg accent, and she hugged Theo until he laughed, and for a while I was able to just stand to the side and watch them and feel something close to normal. My phone buzzed twice during dinner. Both times it was Bennett. The first a voice memo apologizing for missing the ceremony, saying he'd make it up to Theo, saying he loved us. The second a photo he'd sent to our family group chat, a blurry picture of what was allegedly a departure board in Vancouver with his flight circled. It was a convincing photograph. He'd made the effort to find a believable departure board. I gave him that. I went to the washroom between the appetizers and the main course, and I stood over the sink with the tap running, and I breathed. Then I dried my hands, put my phone in my pocket, and went back to the table. Theo's graduation ceremony was held in the Rebecca Cohn Auditorium the next morning. His name was called third in his cohort. I watched him walk across that stage. This boy I had driven to hockey practice at 6 in the morning. This boy I had helped study for the MCAT at the kitchen table for 3 consecutive summers. This boy who had once asked me at age 9 if people could be allergic to sadness. And I had not known what to say, and I sat in the third row beside his grandmother, and I clapped until my palms hurt. He found us afterward in the lobby, still in his gown, holding his diploma in both hands, the way you hold something you don't quite believe is real yet. He looked around once, quickly, checking the crowd, looking for his father. I saw it, and I know he saw that I saw it, but neither of us said anything. I took 100 photographs. I bought him dinner at a restaurant he'd been talking about for months. I ordered a bottle of champagne, and his grandmother made a toast that went on for 11 minutes and was genuinely wonderful. And through all of it, I kept thinking about the Fairmont charge, $4,340 CAD. 2 guests, Bennett Hale. I had spent 19 years learning how to be 2 things at once. Professional, personal, composed, present. The version of myself that sat across from grieving clients and asked careful questions, and the version that came home and made dinner and remembered permission slips. I was doing it again, only this time both versions of me were furious, and I was not going to let either one move until I was ready. I flew back to Burlington on Sunday evening. Bennett was already home when I arrived. I could see his car in the driveway from the cab. The lights were on in the living room. I paid the driver, collected my bag, and stood for a moment on the front path. I thought about the first apartment we'd rented together, on Brunswick Avenue in Toronto. I thought about the hospital corridor where I had paced for 6 hours waiting for Theo to arrive. I thought about the night 4 years ago when Bennett had been laid off from his previous firm and had sat at this same kitchen island and said he didn't know who he was without that job. And I had put my arms around him and told him I'd carry us until he found his footing. And I had. I had carried us. I went inside. Bennett was in the kitchen, making pasta. He had set the table. He had opened a bottle of wine, the good Cad Franc we'd been saving, which felt like either a peace offering or an insult. I couldn't yet decide. He looked up when I came in, and his face did something I'd seen it do before. The specific rearrangement of a man bracing for an argument he knows he deserves. "How was the ceremony?" he asked. "Beautiful," I said. "Theo was wonderful." "I really am sorry I couldn't." "I know," I said. I put my bag down. I poured myself a glass of wine. I sat at the island. "Tell me about Vancouver," I said. He did. He was good at it. I'll give him that. He was fluid and specific, the way practiced liars are. He named the hotel. He named a colleague. He described the mechanical delay at YVR with just enough technical detail to be credible. He'd done his homework. Or maybe it wasn't even homework at this point. Maybe it had become so habitual that it no longer required preparation. I listened to all of it. I asked 3 follow-up questions. I let him finish. Then I said, "I'm going to bed. I have an early call tomorrow." He looked surprised. Possibly relieved, he said goodnight. I went upstairs and I called the private investigator I had referred clients to for 11 years, and I left a message saying I needed to speak with him first thing Monday morning. His name was Sutherland. Retired RCMP, extremely discreet, extremely good. I had used him on 7 cases. I trusted him the way you trust a tool that has never failed you. By Thursday of that week, he had given me what I needed. Photographs, time-stamped, receipts, a name. Her name was Ingrid. She was 31. She worked in commercial leasing, which was how they'd met, according to Sutherland's preliminary report. It had been going on for approximately 14 months. 14 months. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage of my office building when I read that. I sat there for 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I did the math. 14 months ago was March. March, when Bennett had told me his stress levels were through the roof, and I had suggested couples therapy, which he'd declined. March, when I had thought we were going through a rough patch the way all long marriages go through rough patches, and I had been patient, and I had been understanding, and I had been understanding, and I'd been wrong about what I was being patient about. I put my phone in my bag. I went upstairs. I had a client meeting at 2. What Bennett did not know, what he had perhaps never thought to investigate, in the way that people don't investigate things they believe to be permanent, was the structure of our assets. We had bought the Burlington house together. Our names were on that mortgage jointly. That was the obvious thing, the thing he would be thinking about if he was thinking about anything at all. What he was not thinking about was the Oakville property. The rental property I had purchased 6 years ago before the market went completely sideways, using the inheritance from my father's estate. My name only, structured deliberately as a sole proprietorship on the advice of my own financial planner. I had never hidden it. It simply had never come up, the way your own assets don't come up in conversation when a marriage feels permanent. It was worth $1.1 million. Conservative estimate, current market. He was also not thinking about my professional corporation, the one through which I billed, through which I held my practice assets, through which my retirement accounts were structured. My name only. 19 years of my work, organized exactly the way I had organized it, because I was a family law attorney and I understood what sensible asset structuring looked like. He was not thinking about any of this because he had never had to think about it, because I had always handled the complicated things quietly and made sure he never had to worry about the scaffolding that held up our life. That was, I realized, a mistake I was not going to make twice. I called my divorce lawyer. Yes, I had a divorce lawyer, a separate colleague I had cultivated a professional relationship with precisely because I understood the ethical necessity of not representing yourself on the second Friday after Halifax. We met for coffee at a place on Brant Street that I chose because Bennett never went there. Her name was Deborah. She was 62, methodical, and had approximately zero patience for sentiment in a professional context. I respected her enormously. I told her everything in 40 minutes. She asked 8 questions. She took notes in a moleskin with a fountain pen. "When are you planning to tell him?" she asked. "When I'm ready," I said. "What does ready look like?" "It looks like every document in order," I said. "Every account reviewed, every option understood." She nodded. "And the house? We'll have to negotiate. And Theo and Annalise?" I was quiet for a moment. "They're adults," I said. "I'll tell them myself. Before he does." Deborah closed her moleskine. "Good," she said. I told the kids on a Sunday afternoon in early May. Annalise drove up from Hamilton. Theo called in on video. He was on a rotation, couldn't get away. I made tea. I set them down. I told them what had happened as plainly and clearly as I would tell a client, which is to say, without unnecessary detail, without editorializing about their father, and with as much steadiness as I could hold in my voice. Annalise cried. Theo didn't. He went very still and very quiet, the way he'd always done with hard information, like he needed time to properly load it before he could respond. "How long have you known?" Annalise asked. "Since the weekend of Theo's graduation," I said. She looked at her brother's face on the screen and then back at me. "You sat through that whole weekend knowing?" "Yes," I said. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Mum," in a voice that broke something open in my chest that I had been keeping carefully closed for 3 weeks. I reached across the table and held her hand. I told her I was okay. I told her I was going to be okay. I meant both things. Theo, on the screen, said quietly, "What can we do?" "Nothing right now," I said. "Just be good to each other. That's it," I told Bennett on a Tuesday evening. He came home from work at the usual time. I had made dinner, not because I owed him a meal, but because I am not capable of having a serious conversation in an empty kitchen. It felt too staged. There needed to be something ordinary happening. He sat down. He looked at the table and then at me, and I think something in my face told him before I said a word, because he set down his fork very carefully. I said, I know about Ingrid. I know about Banff. I know it's been 14 months. He opened his mouth. He closed it. I'm not interested in a conversation about it tonight, I said. I'm not interested in explanations or apologies or negotiations. Tonight, I'm telling you that I've spoken with Deborah Marsh. I have documentation of everything, and I'd like you to retain your own counsel by end of week. He said my name. Just my name, the way you say someone's name when you've run out of words. I think you should sleep in the guest room, I said, indefinitely. He didn't argue. That surprised me slightly. Maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe he had been expecting this and had already done whatever preparatory grieving a person does when they know they've been found out and are simply waiting for the moment to arrive. He picked up his fork again. He didn't eat anything. We sat in silence for a long time. The months that followed were not cinematic. That's something I want to be honest about. Divorce is not a montage. It is phone calls with lawyers and arguments about square footage and questions about pension division under the Ontario Family Law Act, and a very specific, exhausting kind of grief that has no clean name. Not the grief of death, not the grief of loss exactly, but the grief of realizing you have been living alongside a version of something that was not real. Bennett moved to an apartment in Oakville. Not the Oakville property. He did not get the Oakville property. Deborah was, as I had always suspected, formidable. Ingrid, for what it's worth, was no longer in the picture by the time our separation agreement was finalized. According to a mutual acquaintance who told me more than I'd asked for at a dinner party in September, things had ended badly. Bennett, apparently, had thought the relationship was something it wasn't. She had not. I didn't feel satisfaction about that. I thought I would. I didn't. I felt something quieter. The specific flatness of a prediction that turned out to be correct. Theo finished his residency match in the fall. Emergency medicine, Toronto General. He called me from the steps outside the match ceremony building, and his voice was so wide open with relief and happiness that I had to step away from what I was doing and just hold the phone and listen. Annalise came up from Hamilton for Christmas. We ordered Thai food and watched old episodes of a British baking show we'd both been watching separately for years without knowing the other one was watching it, and at some point she fell asleep on the couch and I sat there in the dark living room with the television off. And I looked at the Christmas tree, which I had put up alone for the first time in 19 years, and which was, honestly, better decorated than any tree we'd had in the last decade, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not okay, exactly, not repaired, but present. Solidly, specifically present in my own life in a way I hadn't been in a long time. There's a version of this story where I tell you I emerged stronger and wiser and that everything happens for a reason. I'm a lawyer. I don't deal in platitudes. What I will tell you is this. I spent 19 years being fluent in someone else's needs and intermittently a stranger to my own. I am relearning the second language. It is slower than I'd like and more awkward than I expected, and occasionally, usually around 2 in the morning when the house is quiet and the contracts are spread out in front of me, I reach for something that isn't there and have to remind myself I set it down on purpose. But I set it down on purpose, and the house is still mine. I keep thinking about the Scotiabank notification. 11:48 on a Friday night. A hotel charge in Banff, 2 guests, my husband's name. That was the moment everything split. Not into before and after, exactly, but into what I had believed was true and what actually was. People ask me sometimes, usually obliquely, how I managed to sit through Theo's graduation knowing what I knew. How I smiled in the photographs and ordered the champagne and listened to his grandmother's 11-minute toast without falling apart. I think the honest answer is that I'd spent 19 years learning to hold 2 things at once. The professional version of me and the personal one. The composed exterior and the interior that was doing the real work underneath. That capacity, the ability to stay functional when something inside you is on fire, I hadn't built it on purpose. But it was there when I needed it. What I've come to understand is that Bennett's choices didn't happen in a vacuum, and neither did mine. He made decisions that compounded over 14 months, each one a small abdication of something he'd agreed to be. And I had made my own decisions, years before any of this, about how to structure a life, how to protect what I'd built, how to understand the difference between what belongs to a partnership and what belongs to you alone. Neither set of choices was accidental. They were both the result of who we each had been choosing, quietly, over a long time. That's not a comfortable thought. It's easier to sort people into categories, the one who wronged and the one who was wronged. But I'm a family law attorney. I have spent my career watching people try to simplify their own stories, and I have watched it fail them every time. The truth is always more textured than that. Bennett became someone capable of this. I became someone prepared for it. We did not arrive at that Friday night at random. What I want to say, what I find myself saying in the small hours when the house is quiet and I'm being honest with myself, is that the three things that actually carried me through this were not courage in any cinematic sense. They were more ordinary than that. The first was integrity, not performing integrity, not the version you display, but the private version, the decision to do things right even when no one is watching, even when it costs you. I structured my assets honestly. I told my children the truth plainly. I did not use my knowledge as a weapon before I was ready to use it as protection. Integrity, I have found, is mostly about what you do in the 11,048 moments when no one is looking and you have every reason to act badly. The second was clarity, the ability to look at a situation and understand it without the distortion of what you wish it were. I'd built that clarity professionally, but I had to choose to apply it personally, which is harder. It would have been very easy to explain away that Scotiabank notification. I didn't let myself. The third was endurance, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, daily kind. Getting on the plane to Halifax, sitting in the third row, clapping until my palms hurt, coming home, making dinner, making the phone calls, doing the next thing and the next thing and the thing after that without any particular assurance that it would eventually feel like enough. The house is still mine. Theo matched a Toronto General. Annalise fell asleep on my couch at Christmas, and I watched the tree in the dark and felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was living inside my own life rather than maintaining someone else's. That's what it cost. That's what it gave back. I think those two things are connected.